Hello and welcome to the Flix Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. Today we have Netflix 359th film from 2021. It's the Indian Hindi language black comedy drama called Pagglait. It's directed by Umesh Bist and stars Sanya Malhotra, Ashutosh Rana, Shruti Sharma, Raghubir, Yadav, and Rajesh. Tailang. I'm Jesse. I'm your host. Apologies for the pronunciation of the names. Obviously, English is my first language, and I've tried my best. But we're here to discuss this film. So if you have not seen Pagglait and you're keen on checking it out, give us a pause and come back a little bit later on, because we will spoil this as we go. And we start off the show with the Fast Flicks, where we do a quick little summary of what the film is all about. So this one, it's about a recently widowed woman who must deal with expectations of his family, her family, and the secrets of her husband. Intriguing. The introduction, black comedy drama. This is a drama. The comedy, I could say they were trying to be humorous at times, but I wouldn't necessarily call it black comedy. Very intrigued. Obviously, this is an international film, so we've got to take it for the target audience, which are people in India, and that's going to come up quite a bit as we go throughout this discussion on this film. So, as we often see with Netflix original films that are international, I could not find out anything about how or when this film was made realistically, other than it was filmed in Lucknow in India from the 19th of November 2019 to the 10th of Jan 2020. It had 12 wins and a further 29 nominations across a variety of Indian film awards. And that's about it. It was released on Netflix on the 26th of March 2021. It had the working title of Aran Ketapal, which translates to Aran Farmer. And I've got the translations around the world for this film, which will probably lead to a nice little discussion anyway, because Pagglait in English, apparently it's the idea, and then it's tricky. There are multiple different translations for what this world sort of translates across to. A majority of the translations are in relation to the word crazy. So it means crazy. And it's tricky because obviously, this film is about a woman who's dealing with grief and dealing with family and all these issues, and the idea that Indian society sees her as crazy because she wants to stand up for herself and be her own person. So that's that idea. But some other translations sort of work in the idea that the Pagglait comes from the word fighter, or someone who listens to the heart and does what the heart says, which is very different to the word crazy. Yes, they can tie in a little bit, but it's a very different word. And obviously around the world, a lot of people have gone, or a lot of countries have gone with that translation of crazy. So in Portuguese, it's called strange girl. Like, that seems a little bit rough. In Greek, it's called nonsense. Don't mind that title if they're just talking about the film in general. In Japanese, it's called strange child. She's definitely not a child. And the fact that you'd even consider her as a child in this film, that's not right. In Romanian, it's called A Place in Society. Not bad. That probably makes a bit more sense. In Russian, it's called A Freak. That's very rough. In Spanish, it's called Idiot. Like, some of these titles are just wild. In Chinese, it's called The Fantasy World of a Small Town Girl. Yeah, okay, I get that. It's just tricky because, I don't know, it just confuses me. In India, I understand that, it might be about this crazy girl because, she doesn't do what society wants, but it just doesn't, I don't know. I find this really, really hard to talk about this film, and that's probably going to lead us into where we're going. But before I discuss my thoughts a little bit more, let's talk about what the critics and audiences are saying about this film. So when it hit Netflix on the 26th of March 2021, the critics on Rotten Tomatoes have given it a 77 out of 100. So 77%, that's on 13 reviews. So that is fresh. Audience, pretty much the same, 75%. That's on less than 50 ratings. So that's fairly positive. IMDb, a 6.9 out of 10 on 10,000 ratings. That, again, is super high, very positive. And Letterboxd, a 3.2 out of 5 on 3,500 ratings and been logged by 5,300. So on Letterboxd, that is a very decent score too. So the overall consensus for this is a pretty positive film. What are my thoughts? There are too many characters in this film. I cannot say, and I'm going to harp on this a lot, and I'll say it a lot. This is a film. This is the film medium. I understand that this is a cultural thing, and it's trying to be fully representative of the grieving period in India. And I understand that. I understand the cultural context behind that. And I understand this is what happens in real life. But if you look at any Hollywood film, it doesn't really represent real life. It's a representation. That means that this film doesn't make good cinema or an engaging narrative, unfortunately. There are some good bits in it. It is fine. I understand. Like, it's well made. It is a good looking film. But for me, there are too many people in this film to make it an engaging film. And this is where we talk about the characters. It's that tricky part. I could talk about 50 different people in this film. It's a 2-hour film, and there are so many characters and so many threads that very few of the characters are actually fleshed out very well. So let's talk about Sanya. This is her film. She is the one who's lost her husband. She's the one that is dealing with every single family member and what they want from this situation, whether it's grief, whether it's acceptance, whether it's money, whether it's ulterior motives. She also has to come to terms with the fact that her husband, who's passed away, never really loved her and had met the true love of his life before he met her. So understanding who he was through this woman that he loved is also a tough situation to deal with. And this probably explains why Sanya struggles to show grief and is more worried about checking her social media accounts and wanting to eat crisps or chips and drink Pepsi. She's obviously intelligent. She's got an education. She speaks English, and she's different to every other woman in the film. And that is a good character to start with. That is a great setup for a character to show the differences in society and how things in society in India possibly need to change a bit. That's a great setup. However, then you add in 1,000 other people and it just becomes diluted. So Astik, her husband, like, they were married for 5 months. We never see him on screen. He's dead. And that's why everyone's gathered in the film. Okay, we get that. The other person or character who's given the most screen time apart from Sanya is Shivendra, who is Astik's father. He is literally just seen weeping, crying, being angry, or being sad the whole time. So I understand, yes, effective performance on the screen. And I get it. He's lost his son, which he didn't think was possible. But the son was also the only financial income for the family. So he feels lost and rejected from society. Cool. Another good character. But then the rest of the characters, they can't be fleshed out well when you've got so many things. I'm going to touch on a few of them. I'm leaving so many out, but I'm going to talk about the main ones that are there to support Sanja's story. So we've got Nazia, who is Sanja's best friend. She comes to this grieving period to support her. And this is obviously the grieving period that Astik's family have set out. And she's only come because she's found out about Astik's death through Facebook. So that idea of, and we see Sanya scrolling through social media at times. That's why Nazia's there. That's her friend. They've got that connection. We see Alok. Alok is Astik's younger brother, who has to live up to the high expectations of his family during this grieving period. You know, you've got to eat on the floor, you're not allowed to drink, you're not allowed to smoke. He struggles with all of these things. And also he struggles with the fact because he thinks so highly of Sanya and he almost wants to step into his brother's role of being her support person. And he has this resent for his brother because I think he says, you know, he was always a problem even after death. But Sanya, to him, like, she teaches him English. These are all things that he sees as positives for her. Parchin is the other guy that's sort of there, and he's probably the most normal in the film. He shows an interest in Nazia, Sanja's friend. He goes off and does things for them. He fixes the doorbell. He's the one that's in charge of the receipt for the ashes, all these sorts of things. So he's a responsible person. Then we have Aditya, this random guy that pops in and proposes to Sanya because he wants to start a restaurant and she's got the money from a stick's will. Random. Then we've got Sanja's parents who come to visit as well. It's a clash of cultures there because her parents, wherever they come from in India, they're used to Western toilets and facilities. So there's concern that they're not going to survive 2 weeks during this grieving period without the normal toilets. And there's concerns over their other 2 daughters who aren't married. And now Sarjas doesn't have a husband and the mum's superstitious. These are all just little things about the characters. The only other person that I think plays a really important role in this film is Akansha. And Akansha is Astik's ex-lover and colleague. This is the girl his true love, the one that he loved, and why he never spoke to Sanya, why he never made love to Sanya. And she plays a role in Sanya learning more about her husband. She knew his favorite color. She knew the tea that he liked to drink, these types of things. They never got together though because her parents didn't approve of him. So that's where she sort of sits in this whole story. Then there's probably another 15 characters we could talk about in their roles, but that's where I'm going to stop. We're going to talk about the director, Umesh Bist. 7 directing credits. His debut feature was called Oh Terry, and that sits at a 3.3 out of 10 on IMDb, which is super low. So it's nice to see that this one's bounced back a bit and has some recognition from the film loving community, is what I'd say. All right, let's talk about some scenes. What are some scenes in this film that worked? What are some scenes that didn't necessarily work? So some ones that were good. There's a grandma character. I didn't even talk about her, but the grandma character, she sort of sits in a chair the whole film. Doesn't say much, but she's super sweet. She seems completely out of it most of the time, but had these really nice moments with Sanya and someone that she could talk to when everyone else in that house, apart from her friend Nazia who was there, felt like she couldn't speak to them. So I thought that was nice. There's a scene where the men of the house go off to do the ceremony with Astik's ashes. This was edited and cut really nicely with Sanya escaping the house to get some freedom, to get some food, in town with Nazia. I thought that was done really well. Shivendra, Astik's dad, there's a moment where he's trying to do the accounts, work out the money, the costs for the wake, including, I think they were ordering 20 kilos of rice. That's a lot of people for a wake. But then Sanya comes and sits and helps him. I thought that was a really sweet moment and sort of gives some motivation to her about what she should do with the will and the money from the will. There's a moment where Sanya's helping. This is the one moment that I laughed in the film. Sanya's helping the grandma do some sort of exercises. And that Aditya guy's there as well. And then the grandma just lets this huge big fart rip. That was funny. And I did like that Sanya left these notes for Shivendra and the family and some money when she went. I thought that was a nice closure to her story as she goes off to find some freedom too. What are some things in this film that didn't necessarily work for me? I think that the moment, the moment that Sanya finds the photo of Akansa, like Astik's lover, in his closet, this song kicks in. There are a few Bollywood songs in this film. This song kicks in and the lyrics were along the lines of, why did he turn out to be a cheater? Like, laughable. Laughable. Halfway through the film, this relative called Tarun rocks up with that son Aditya. Like, seriously, like when I was watching, I thought, who the hell are these people? And why do we need more characters at this moment of the film? It just didn't make sense. Akansha, she takes Sanya to Astik's workplace to see his office. And there's a moment where she just stops at his office door and his name is on a plate on the door and she just stares at it. I just thought that was lame. There's these 2 little cousins. I don't even know their names. They were flirting. They were like under the age of 10. They were flirting and talking about kissing. Like, what the hell? Like, incest. Like, I did not get that. There's a moment where Sanya goes to Akansha's place, sees how nice it is, and then there's this big focus on the bed in the middle of the bedroom, and Sanya loses it, like asking, what side did my husband sleep on? That was just laughable. There's another song moment where Sanya is in some club, and there's this weird slow-mo. That was weird. There's a moment where Alok confronts Sanya about marrying Aditya, and he runs off crying. That was lame. And the soundtrack while that final ceremony was happening around the fire, the 13th day, the final farewell, Aditya's cracking it because he thinks that Sanya's pregnant, so he's leaving. The music was just crazy, chaotic, psychotic. It just did not fit what was going on the screen. That was really weird too. Anyway, some themes, some ideas. What's this film trying to say? Marriage in different cultures looks very different. Obviously, that idea of death and cultural customs as well. It's a world that seems very different to what I know. The idea of empowerment, I guess, like female rights, women empowerment, taking control of your own life, deciding what you want, that independence from a man's world as well, and grief, and not having to show grief or what people expect of you, because suppression that women can feel from men in a society too. There needs to be that self-realization that in this film, the world think that women who rise up and stand up for themselves are crazy, like the title says, and no one asks what women actually want. So that's a really important message too. I just said grief then, but that idea of grief and how do you deal when you lose someone in your life? That idea of having to forgive someone when they're not around to forgive either. Family dysfunction plays a massive part in this film. That idea of greed, making people do the wrong things, that all ties into it. And love plays a big part too. What is love and what isn't love? you can't get married without love. And there's this line they were talking about, it's like having dessert without dinner. I thought that was an effective little line as well. What did I take away from this film? I think I've honed on about this quite a bit, but my frustration in trying to work out who everyone was in this film and how they were connected came to a climax during this scene where an insurance guy comes to the house to give Sanya the 5 million rupees as a part of the will. I paused the film to count how many people were in the shot. And I understand this shot is about the pressure that she's feeling with everyone watching her sign these papers, but there were 15 characters in shot. 15. All standing around looking at her. And each of those characters had some sort of dialogue or some sort of moment in this film, and I couldn't tell you who half of them were. To me, that doesn't work in a film. Wild. Absolutely wild. All right, some questions, some pondering, some thoughts, some ideas. That 13-day mourning process, I thought it was very interesting. It's a very distant thing from what I know. It just seems like such a long time and such a big process to have so many different members of family and friends come together and spend time together and drop everything else in their world to complete that process. I just thought that was an interesting thing. I liked the fact that we never saw a stick on the screen or were told how he died. I thought that was a nice touch. I thought that was good. They left enough intrigue in the film as well. This is just a personal thing. We've covered a lot of Indian films on this podcast, quite a lot, and quite a few recently too. What really frustrates me is in a lot of the commentary on Indian films that I'm looking at as I'm researching the movies and trying to work out some thoughts to put together, they refer to dialogues instead of dialogue in the film. And I understand that the S on the end of dialogues, they put it on because of the lack of understanding of the English language, is my guess. I understand if English is your second language, you'd add the S to incorporate that dialogue is more than one because many characters are using it. But it's just not right. It frustrates me. I don't know how to get that message out. It's dialogue. Dialogue in a film. The dialogue between characters. I understand that it's multiple because multiple characters are doing it, but it just doesn't make sense. It is the dialogue, not the dialogues. Unless I'm completely wrong, but to me, that's what it is. The last thing I probably wanted to discuss, that idea of Sanya. She's always hungry in this film. She's always wanting food. She's always wanting to go out. She's wanting chips. Is this a symbol for her wanting more from life? That's my only explanation for it. She's wanting more. She can't grieve because she wants more from life, and I think that would make sense. Other than that, I'm ready to wrap this one up. We give the film a rating out of 5 on this show. For me, like the film, it was shot, it was performed well, it looked good, it had some really good messages and some important things to say, but I had a headache. Again, I'm saying it. I had a headache from trying to work out who was who. Showing culture exactly how it is on screen sometimes doesn't work. And for me, this is a case of that. There are too many characters in this film. I'm giving it a 2 out of 5. It's not the worst film in the world, but a 2 out of 5 for me. We're on socials. We've got Instagram. We have Facebook. And we have X, formerly known as Twitter. The question I wanted to put out for social this week is that idea, and this is in relation to people not being together because of their parents not approving. Like, would you miss out on the chance of true love because your parents disapproved? I think it's a very hard question to answer depending on where you live in the world. The societal expectations and the financial and emotional and family consequences that can have if you go against the word of your family. I can't relate to that because I feel like I've been privileged to have the life that I can chase what I want to chase. I can do what I want to do with the support of my family. So I think that's a really interesting sort of question. We're back next week. We do have another international film next week, but this one is an Indonesian drama from 2021. It's called Tersanjung the Movie. This one's directed by Pandu Ajisura, Hanung Bramatoy, and Nur Jirhat Hisyam. So 3 directors. It stars Clara Bernadette, Georgino Abraham, and Kevin Ardalova. That name rings a bell. I reckon he was in a film we didn't do too long ago. As always, thanks for hanging out for this episode. If you're keen on checking that film out, give it a watch before next week, and I will see you then.